done.
All right, everybody, welcome into another edition of Silver Lining Podcast. I'm Adam. Across from me is Grunkle Rex, Uncle Rex. As we've been talking for the last few podcasts, that Rex and I started this podcast talking about our family and about healing and a book. Now we're focusing on really healing and other people who have healed and how they heal from life's tragedies. And so today we have Ben on. We've had Ben on before. He's my cousin. People loved having Ben on. A lot of people had questions for Ben as he has helped a lot of people through therapy with PTSD and other things. And he's a vet, and he was special forces, and like he had a really great story. And we've talked to him. We have his wife Alice on as well, who talked about being a wife of somebody who came back with PTSD and how to deal with that. And she's going to be doing some great stuff with our podcast with a group, and we'll talk more about that. But today we love stories. We love to hear other people's stories, not just our story, but other people. And I think everybody has a story. And in my opinion, I think everybody could write a book, in my opinion. But from what Ben said that his friend Will had a story, and Ben has worked with him. So Ben, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Will and hear his story, and maybe find out how he healed, and maybe some things about healing too.
Maybe a quick review of Ben's background too, because there are some people, especially in the last couple of months, that joined us and maybe didn't hear Ben before. So Ben, just a brief amount of your background you think is appropriate.
Sure. Yeah. Ben, go ahead. Do that.
Yeah, so you guys know me from the podcast before. I did some time in the Air Force in special operations as a pararescueman. Prior to that, my life was filled with trauma and abuse and the things that were difficult for me as a youth. And so I went to war, came back. I contracted for several years after that. I lost some brothers along the way and steered myself, instead of towards physical medicine, towards mental health to solve my own problems and create a pathway to start healing other guys who had come across some of my similar experiences and some of my similar difficulties. In the military, I was focused on getting people back to be with their families. And then after that, I kind of found the same value in mental health, trying to get people back with themselves and with the people that they cared about. So I started doing mental health. I'm a licensed professional counselor now, and I've done some work with veterans. That's who I mainly focus on, although my practice is open to everyone. And Will is one of the guys who I've done some work with, and I was pretty impressed by the things that he's overcome and by what he's doing now. So Will, I want to thank you for your service. We've served around some of the similar timeframes, and we've talked about that before. All of that is on the table. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the people that are paying attention.
Hey, I'm William. I was in the Marine Corps from 09 to 13 active, and then I went back in 17 to 22 with the reserves. Then went into executive protection, did that whole deal, and kind of sort of started drinking myself to death in those in that last decade. Not really knowing how else to deal with some of the stuff, just trying to, put on that strong front, be a hard target, and was basically hiding from most of my problems, and not addressing a lot of the stuff that, the stuff like childhood bullying, not feeling like, I fit in, always, relying on my resume as a way to, prove my self-worth instead of, just having some. And so yeah, I ended up hitting my bottom in December, or I guess it was January of 2023 is when I checked into treatment. And then that's when I was introduced to Ben, and started working on just getting back on track and figuring out what the next right move for me was. I did not think that included moving to a horse ranch in Arizona, but
yes, you're in Arizona. Well, yes.
Yeah. So that's what happened. I stopped, it's one of those deals. I stopped trying to control every little detail. I stopped trying to like make it Williams way and just let things happen. And it's been wonderful. I'm the program director for Resilience Unleashed here at Bethany's Gate Ranch. We serve veterans and first responders. We do equine facilitated wellness and coaching, and work through post-traumatic growth, which is based on the science from Dr. Tedeschi. And you know, that's the biggest thing, was once I got out of that whole sense of self and started trying to be of service to my fellow man, that's when everything really started turning around. So
So do you, my question is, you mentioned a couple of things. A, let's go back to drinking, because there's a lot of people who can relate to this. At one point in your life, you got to a point where you couldn't get up in the morning or face life without drinking alcohol, because that would get rid of, at least temporarily, the pain that emotional pain that you were going through.
that's right. Yeah. And I mean, it got sad. It got to the point where, you know, just, I bought a house back in 2013, and during COVID, you know, I thought, oh, I'm going to, you know, redo this whole place. It's going to be, you know, got nothing but time and energy to throw at it, and it's just going to look great. I couldn't make it to the hardware store and back without stopping at the bars, you know, and just that self-medication spiral that finally, you know, took over. And I think that was the saddest point, was losing an argument with myself about whether or not I was going to drink that day.
And then when you said you got rock bottom, and Rex and I have talked several podcasts about people who get rock bottom when you hit that level. And then you said you went into therapy, and then you met Ben and all that. What happened to where you hit rock bottom that you got out of it? Like, that you said, enough's enough. Like, what happened in your heart, your mind, your spirit? What happened?
It was one of those deals where I was really tired of having to face what I'd done the night before. I think you can only make so many excuses, and when that pattern of behavior just continues, that you realize, you know, you're not just lying to the people around you. You know, I was lying to myself. I was constantly not going to let this happen again, you know, daily, you know. And that last night, it was nuts. I got myself in a position that I hated being in. You know, I was stranded basically at a stranger's house. Slept off the drunk, because I didn't want to drive home drunk. So I slept it off. Got up the next day to get cigarettes and was driving home. And that's when I got pulled over. And I still, even after, you know, trying to do the right thing, blew a .12. So that's how drunk I was. But 8 hours later, it was a .12. I was gone, you know.
Yeah. So you went through that whole thing where you went through rehab. A lot of people have tried rehab. Did rehab work for you, or what was it, a mindset that you were like, no matter what, I need to change? Or like, because I know a lot of people fail at rehab.
I had an uncle who said something that kind of stuck with me. And this was way before I got into recovery. He was just telling me about, you know, his sobriety, because it wasn't, I was an adult when I realized that he was sober. I'd always assumed he was always with us when we were drinking. He was always around us when we were goofing off. And he was just a nice uncle who was keeping us out of trouble, is what he was doing. And then I realized one day that, you know, he's just in there with Dr. Pepper. He's, you know, and he said it's a real sad day when you realize rock bottom has a basement. And
wow, what a great saying that is.
yeah.
Right.
And so, yeah, when I woke up, you know, my second DUI, I called my dad. I said, I don't know what to do. And he had heard of a place and got me in there. And then once I was there, I knew that I'd seen enough guys go through that cycle that I was either going to be stuck in that cycle, or I was going to grab what I need, get out, and go back to it. And I wanted it to be a launching point. And I think that's one of the things that with this program, with the post-traumatic growth, that I really agree with, is it says, you know, this is a launching point. This is just show you what you can survive. Now let's, you know, not let that suck us down. Let's make that a launching point. And so that was kind of the mindset that I had of, you know, I need to grab as many tools as I can And I didn't even finish the program I got into. I just I grabbed as many tools as I could, found a good sponsor, I got a good counselor, and hit the road.
Yeah. That's kind of where I want to go with this. I want to go with Ben first, and kind of like, I don't know what you're allowed to share or talk about or whatever, but when you met Ben, you got to that point, and then you worked with Ben and you got better and better and better and better. And then now here you are helping other people in the same kind of capacity. How it's just like, Rex and I, we love that, optimists come in and they feel something, and then they feel like they want to help somebody. And obviously, when you help other people, you just feel better about your life, yourself, everything. So Ben, can you share with us how you helped Will, or maybe that relationship to where now he's actually doing the same, helping other people?
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because when Will and I met and we started working together, that facility, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Will, it wasn't perfect for you. It didn't speak to you in all the ways that you wanted to stay and continue that program in particular. Tell me a little bit about that, how you were able to navigate maybe it not being the perfect place for you to feel like you were going to heal, and how you came about that decision of going on your own and taking these tools that you learned.
That was, yeah, that was, I waffled on that decision for a while, and I did stay there for 3 months through, I think it was I was at 90 days of a 7 month program. But it was a thing where I found myself between those two different types of people, where I had guys, in the program for 3, 4, 5 times, just trying to complete it, and, then there were guys who were stuff out of the park and doing great, and then I'd never see him again. And when I sat and looked at some of the guys that were trying to help me through, I don't want to be I don't want to be too judgmental on them, because they saved my life. But it had seemed that became sort of a safe haven, and they didn't really want to go much further past the gates. And I didn't want to end up in that position. I wanted a point where, I could go out and do something. I didn't know what at the time, but I knew that my time there wasn't going to be very long. Even when I left, though, I did stick around for a few months as a volunteer. Even though I wasn't a graduate, they're totally fine letting me come back and work and help out if I could. And so that was a good experience. And I think that let us leave, not so much in a place where I can say, I told you so, but they felt better about me leaving the program and moving on without completing the full term.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I want to help people understand who are listening that sometimes these programs don't have all of the pieces that are perfect. And sometimes you don't have a perfect counselor there, or some people that you're working with that aren't the best, but it can still be that launching point that you talked about. As long as you're willing to take those tools and use them, you can make any of these things a success for yourself. You don't have to put that pressure on yourself that you graduated or you completed. Like you said, there were guys who did graduate and came back because they weren't able to maintain that same focus and that same drive when they were out of those gates of that program, with their own choices. What's something that you think, maybe that we did together or that you did in that program that helped you maintain that, outside of it, that helped you get that confidence that said, I can handle these things as they come in, without being in a facility 24/7?
That was, yeah, that was one of the things that, we kind of worked on. I think it was, I came to that realization that, I sort of had that Marine Corps mindset where I was expecting them to be perfect. I was expecting them to check all the boxes, make sure everything was as smooth and efficient as they could make it. And I sort of had to come to realize that's what they were trying to do. They weren't succeeding, but they were doing their best, and it didn't fit Williams' box of what it should be, but who cares? The only person who cares about that is me. And so once I realized, they're doing their best, and they gave me more resources than I could ever put to full use. Uh, that's when my whole mind, I think my mindset shifted. That, there's plenty to be thankful for, and it's not always going to be perfect. And if I go out there and I screw up, those people that I was mad at, who were there for me, are still going to be there for me. And that's part of the realization that I had to come to, that my ego was getting in my way again.
Rex talks about ego all the time. Rex, what is it about ego that gets all of us? Like, you mentioned it in your book a lot.
Well, it's such a natural part of us. We need our ego. We need, that's where we recognize our self-worth. And when we're struggling to not, because we don't have self-worth, sometimes we let our ego go beyond barriers that keep it healthy. Right. And we let it go, trying to justify, trying to show, or trying to build, or trying to prove self-worth that we haven't done the work to recognize inside of ourselves. And I bet William or Ben could give a much better explanation than that, but that's my take on it.
Well, I just know that we mentioned ego a lot, and how we have to learn how to control our ego, or figure out how to deal with all of our egos. Ben?
Yeah, it's perfect what you're talking about, Rex, because earlier Will mentioned some bullying, and it is something that we worked on. And you guys are talking about ego, and he's talking a little bit about that in driving his decisions. And what we talked about, I don't know if you remember this, Will, is like those I am statements, those negative core beliefs that come into play, and where they developed. And I think, if I remember correctly, you were a little bit surprised that those were so powerful from your experience before the military.
Right. Yeah. And it was surprising, because I was, pretty emotional going through that. Because I blamed everything on Afghanistan for so long. Oh no, it was elementary school.
Right.
What a realization. Ben, you've talked about that before. It's a lot of times PTS is just a result of earlier childhood trauma, not necessarily what happened in war. That's a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, and I think what we come across are these messages that we're not good enough, or we're not enough. And it cements in a time that we don't have the life experience to counter it. And so some of these things that we're talking about, I've done as well, where we're trying to counter that message, and we make choices that are contrary to our values, to what we really want, to what's really important to us. But it's enough to counter the message or make us not feel it. And, Will and I have discussed that before. It's that escape, or that avoidance, that is such a powerful thing in substance use, in any kind of distraction, to quiet that voice, because we really don't know how to fight it. We don't know where it came from. We're surprised by how powerful it is. And it turns into kind of sounding like ourselves, saying that we're not good enough. And then we have to find a way to prove that we're not. Will, what are some of the things that you recognize, and we're kind of backtracking, talking about the things we worked with in that battle of your I am versus your I am not?
What do you mean?
Do you remember looking into this and thinking, this was my voice, and maybe, some of these things I did at war were trying to counter that, some of the achievements that I had?
Right. Yeah. No, it was definitely, I think a lot of what we discussed was mostly, my reliance on my accomplishments, trying to prove myself, because in my head, I wasn't worthy. So they think I'm not worthy. So if I do this, then they'll accept me, and then I can accept myself. And that never worked out for me. That it just, kept growing that a little wider and wider. But that was a big thing, was getting to that point, with that whole, I think I told Ben in one of the sessions, I said, I don't know how I have such a big ego when I have no self-worth. Like it's completely out of balance. And that was my way of battling that, was going after, the resume. you know, what can I put on my resume that proves, you know, and then it's funny because I'd be, you know, somewhere drunk in a bar and I don't have a resume to hold up, you know, I just feel like an outcast anyways, so.
Yeah, and that's amazing too, because you did all the things, right? You're a decorated veteran. You were in Afghanistan. You did executive protection at a high level. You climbed the cool guy ladder. You did all the cool guy things. And it resonates with me because I felt the same way. Those accomplishments still didn't silence that voice.
Right.
It wasn't enough. And we felt like we're Superman, but at the same time felt like we're not good enough. And that's a really interesting counterintuitive thing for our brain to be battling, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that's why, you know, when I took this job, one of the things that I love about it is I can't give myself any credit other than answering a phone call. That's and I think uh, I've got to realize, you know, just people want me here for me, you know, and not because of what I did over there, not because of my career, you know, the management positions helped. But other than that, you know, I just got to a point in my life where I realized, you know, how much people just enjoyed working with me when I wasn't throwing my resume in their face or telling them how much I knew. And so getting this job and going about it without any of that, you know, just being like, hey, I'm here to learn. I'm here to do what I can and you know, let's have fun. And that's done more for me than, you know, any leadership position that I had before now.
Wow.
Can we go back just a little bit? Because Ben had mentioned like maybe 3 or 4 podcasts ago when we had him on about, you know, being a kid and being bullied. And you mentioned being in school, being bullied. And then in my first book, I did a whole chapter on my son, Zach, who he was getting bullied at school. And he was calling me, telling me that he was sick and I need to go pick him up from school. The nurse would call me 4 or 5 days in a row. And I had no idea he was being bullied. And so he was just like, I just can't go back. I'm sick. I'm anxiety. It's like, well, you're not sick. You're fine when you get home. And so there's this whole thing. And I feel like there's a lot of parents that watch or grandparents that watch that have had kids or grandkids that are bullied. And since both of you have more experience, I did it. I took my son out of school and I homeschooled him just so he wouldn't have to go through that. I don't know if that's the right call or not, but that's the call that I went with my conscience. And I was like, I can't have him do that. So what advice both of you could give to maybe somebody who has kids or grandkids that have been bullied? And since both of you were there, what do you wish would have happened and how did you deal with it?
What do you got? Well, I think you've got some pretty good insight on this from what I remember in our conversations.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I was probably like your son. I was never really honest with my folks about it. In fact, me and my mom had really interesting conversations after my sessions with Ben because I did the same thing. I was in the nurse, you know, and I would just continue to go to the nurse. And she remembered a couple times, you know, where other parents would intervene um, because they felt the other kids were being rude to me. But I did a pretty good job, I think, of hiding it from my mom. I switched schools in third grade. And I had remembered that being due to bullying and talked to Ben about it being due to bullying and all this stuff. And then when I talked to my mom goes, no, it's because your principal was an idiot.
Right. You're getting real perspective. Your mom just slaps you in the face with like real things. You're like, no.
She was no, she was dumb. So yeah, for me, it was one of those deals where I don't have the right answer, you know. But myself, I wish I had been more honest about it
Yeah.
uh, to the people around me, you know, because that's where some of those thoughts came in. Because essentially, I ended up agreeing with the bullies, and that's that started this path. And had I don't know, maybe if I had spoken up or said something, we could have nipped it in the bud. But I never did. And so,
Well, I know my son actually, he was like, I'm just sick, or I'm just like, he never admitted that he was being bullied. And I just looked at him in the eye. Both of us had tears in our eyes. I said, hey, just tell me, you can tell me anything, tell me anything. I will not judge you. You can tell me anything that's going on, and you will not be judged. And I will make sure that whatever is happening will not happen. So just tell me. And we sat there in the car for 30 minutes without him figuring out what he wanted to say. Then he finally just told me what was happening. And so at that point, that was a great breaking point for me. Even though at the time my wife was like, he's a wuss, he's got to go to school. Like we fought over how to deal with his
Yeah.
bullying. And I was just like, I'm staying home. I'm going to homeschool him. And he's not going back to that school. So, but it took a while for him to feel comfortable about saying that. Cause I don't think kids that get bullied really, they're embarrassed by it, or there's something going on to where they don't want to say anything.
I think the biggest thing is, I think that's great. I think the biggest thing is if I had permission to have those feelings, I would have,
Yeah.
but I didn't think I had permission. And so I buried them, you know.
Ben, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what he said. The idea in your head is that it's not safe, or I'm not safe, or something about me is inadequate. And so if we're already thinking to ourselves, like I did, you know, I'm not good enough, or I can't speak up for myself in this moment, then I'm also not going to advocate for myself around the people that love and support me, because it's unfamiliar to me and I'm not sure what the outcome is going to be. I've already gone through all this pain. If I come out with these things and I go through more pain, I would like to avoid that, right? And I think in working with Will and a lot of people that I work with, that's one of the biggest barriers. And we've discussed that on the podcast before too, is having somebody that you feel safe with, that you can unload these things on, because that's really what it takes for you to realize that it's okay for you to speak it. And then it's okay for you to define it. And if you can, we say, if you can name it, you can tame it. If it's got a definition, it's something that we can attack. It's something we can work with. But like we said before, you know, for Will, it was a big surprise that that was such a big deal. I think one of the first times he talked to me about it, he brushed it off as being completely insignificant. You know, one of my questions is, what's happened in your past that's been difficult for you? What challenges have you overcome? You know, did you have struggles with parents or kids at school or authority figures? No, my childhood was great. You know, I had supportive parents. I was fine. I had lots of friends. So there's a brush off that happens. That's a natural protective instinct that really takes a lot of work to get through, I think.
That's all I had was I went through both of those things. Rex, anything else that you're sitting back noticing that maybe we need to talk about?
I'm sitting back just completely fascinated by all of this. Something I would like to know, if you don't mind sharing. What you're doing now, is it called equine therapy? Equine therapy. It's therapy through working with horses, right?
Right.
What's it
Right.
called?
But I'm not a therapist, so I can't call it therapy.
Okay. So what do you do? What's your role right now with
But yeah, we have the Resilience Unleashed program. We take veterans and first responders, and we work through the post-traumatic growth workbook that was written by Dr. Tedeschi.
Mhm.
And in that course, my goal with it is to give that space where the veterans and first responders can talk about this type of stuff in front of, you know, give them that permission to open up. And that's the most significant thing. You know, I'll get guys who, I had one guy who just sat there quietly the whole time. And then the last session, he just opened up, and he's been involved ever since, continues to volunteer with us, comes back to the sessions often. And he's been, you know, one of the guys that I've paraded around. And, but creating that space and that camaraderie while we're working with the horses are wonderful, because they're just sort of a reflection of however you're feeling in that moment. If you're nervous and anxious, they're nervous and anxious. They're a flight animal, you know, and you're the predator. So if they pick up on you being nervous, they want to know what's making their predator nervous. And so that's one of the huge things is it starts the conversation. The horses really have some gift of just getting into those emotions that, and pulling stuff out of, grown men, these big badasses that, save people's lives for a living. And then they just, they come out and they're just willing to talk about anything. And we've had a pretty good run with it. What we do at the end is really fun. We end up doing a cattle drive. And so a lot of these guys have never been on a horse. Some of them never seen a horse. And by the end of it, we're working cattle together down in Bumblebee, Arizona.
Is this like City Slickers 5? We get the cameras out and rolling like a bunch of guys that don't know how to be outside. And by the way, horses, I love animals. And Rex and I, we have talked about healing and how people heal, and petting a dog. There's something that releases stuff when you have a dog to love on, and dogs recognize that too. Horses are the same. I've always said I want to go hug a cow, lay down on the ground and hug a cow. I can hug a horse too. But for you to actually give us therapy, like legitimate science behind the horses and therapy, this is something that we've talked about healing on this podcast for a year now, and this is the first time that's come up.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've been learning a lot, and especially with them, my initial reaction to them was that essentially, if you've got a nervous horse, the way you calm them down is exactly the same way as you stop or tunneling or anything. It's the diaphragmatic breathing, calming yourself, trying to lower your heart rate, lower your nerves, and that's the horses react to that. And so when I went to the VA, they gave me a sheet of paper that told me what to do when I was having an anxiety attack. And when I was having an anxiety attack, I wasn't going to look for my piece of paper.
Right. You were in a panic attack.
And so when I'm out there with the horses, I teach them how to calm down the horses. Well, now they're getting those reps in. And so it's not new. When they feel themselves, the shallow breathing start, they know exactly, all right, this is how I would do it if the horse did,
Wow.
And so that was the initial thing. And then from there, as I've been working with this organization and they've been teaching me more and more, just watching how some of the guys just open up, on the emotional level, not just the physical side of it. It's amazing to watch. The horses pick up on what the guys are going through and communicate that to me. It sounds insane saying that out loud, but it truly is. I can tell when a guy's isolating, I've got a horse that will go out and annoy him. She'll just go and get into their space and not let them sulk off to the back edge of the group, and so
wow.
It's amazing.
I love hearing that. I know Rex, has gone to a couple of therapists and counselors, and I haven't gone yet to any therapists or counselors, but this may be the route for me. I mean, literally, I love horses, and I feel like that may be a therapy for me to do. And you're in Arizona, so I may get your info and head out that way at some point, because I think that may do something for me.
And on that note, who does it work for, William? What's your experience? Do people try other types of therapy and then it doesn't work and they come out and get breakthroughs with what you're doing?
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those things. I think in every different type of channel you go down, there's that responsibility of you have to be open to it. You have to let it happen. But even then, depending on the horses, you've got some horses that just bulldoze through that barrier. They know how to get what they want. And I had one guy who came out. I had this horse on the property that I just did not get along with. And it's funny because they all have personalities. It's like dogs or cats. Horses are the same way. And there was one, me and him just butted heads over everything. He was pushy. He didn't want to listen to me. And then I brought out this old veteran, and he was crippled and he was hurting in a lot of physical pain, but also had a lot of stuff that he needed to work through. And the horse just came over and just leaned on him, and they kind of held each.
Wow.
Himself had been through countless surgeries, all kinds of physical pain, and he picked up on it. And from that point on, that veteran started talking about those surgeries and how it affected his life and how it affected his marriages and his kids. And you know, he tried to put on that strong face and power through it. And he ended up hurting relationships because he was in that mindset all the time and he never opened up to anyone. And I don't think if that horse that I didn't think highly of was there that day,
Right.
we would have that conversation.
This is just fascinating. Man, I love this.
Will, how is it different for you now than when you were going through the beginnings of your recovery? Now that you're viewing this, you're witnessing people change, but you're also having to maintain your own health, right? How is it different for you now? What do you do for yourself?
Well, for myself, the horses, it's sort of one of those things. My favorite job in the Marine Corps was a squad leader. And I liked having the guys to take care of, because that kind of kept me out of my own head and it kept me busy. And now I've got 11 horses here that I've got to do the same thing for. The difference is none of them have called me from jail yet. So that was just the Marines doing that. But these, yeah, they've been wonderful. But for me, just being around them, constantly having a job, that, you know, they rely on me and I rely on them for that balance, because when I feel myself, you know, starting to lose a little bit of patience and I realize, all right, I need to, you know, I either need to get into a meeting or I need to get on a horse, and the horses are always here for that. You know, they love it.
That's great.
So, that's become my hobby, my life, my job, my occupation. They've sort of taken over, and I welcome it, because it's gotten me on a schedule. You know, their schedule I have to adhere to. Otherwise, they let me know. We've got mostly mares, and they're loud when I don't feed them on time. So, yeah. But you know, that's another thing that I struggled with was, you know, I never really kept myself to a schedule. Once I left the Marine Corps, or once I got off of a contract, you know, I'd do whatever I felt like at the moment. I didn't have structure in my life. These horses provide that for me.
So working with the guys, working with the horses, having responsibilities and schedules, having things like meetings that are available to you, those are all helpful. It sounds like those are the elements that you add to kind of maintain your health and your wellness. How do you feel about yourself now versus how you felt about yourself when we first met?
Well, there's still part of me that's shocked every day I get to go to work, you know, but I don't know if that'll ever change, just because this is nothing that I thought I would be doing. You know, I was trying to climb that ladder in the executive protection world. And so to make this switch is such a blessing, you know, that I just can't get over it. But you know, I'm making the most of it. I know that I'm extremely lucky to have this opportunity. And so I'm making the most out of every second of it. And that just, you know, makes me happy. It's satisfying, fulfilling, you know, all the cliches. I just can't get over it. And you know, that it comes down to, I just had to give myself permission that one day to ask for help. And led down this
Yeah,
path.
and your story is going from, you said, hit rock bottom, and then there's a basement to rock bottom, to going all the way up to every day you wake up going, I'm doing something that I love, and it
Right.
brings me happiness and joy every single day. And I think that's all of our goals, you know, in life, is to wake up every day to feel that, to feel what you're feeling. To be excited about life, excited about have the opportunity, have gratitude and grateful. And so here you are, a shining example of how we all want to be at some point and how to get there. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing your story. I know there's probably tons of people that are watching this that are like, man, that I need to get to that level that he's at.
Yeah, no kidding. Thanks so much, William, for sharing this. This will be valuable, I think, to a lot of our optimists.
Well, I appreciate y'all having me. This was fun.
All right.
And Ben, you're not so bad yourself.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
No, thanks, Will, for coming on. I love the work that you're doing please make sure, like, if you want to tell everybody who's listening how to get a hold of your organization or how to refer somebody to it if they know somebody that fits that tag of first responder or veteran that might need help with your
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, we'll do. We're Bethany's Gate Ranch. It's gate as in walk, so GAIT. And you can get in touch with us. Bethany'sGate.org is the easiest way to go through. We've had a few people reach out on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page. But the number on Bethany'sGate.org, if you hit extension 2, that goes straight to my phone. So I can.
You're giving your personal number. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
We got straight access to you.
Straight access to me.
Hey,
Yeah.
wait, what part of Arizona are you in? It's got to be cold. It's got to be cooler than it is here in Phoenix.
Oh yeah, we're up in Prescott. We're not.
Oh, so yes. Yeah, okay. I was wondering, I was like, how are
We
you
don't live in the
outside
heat.
with horses? Well, great. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for giving us, sharing all that with us. And yeah, I hope a lot of people do reach out to you, because I feel like I want to be part of that group to try. I just would love to try to do something like that.
Yeah, it's fun. We're welcome to have you anytime. So just
Awesome.
reach out. I just gave everyone my personal number, so.
I like that. All right, Rex, your turn. What's your cell number?
Right. Yeah. rexandadam@gmail.com. That's pretty direct.
That's pretty direct.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Ben, thanks for bringing William on. We really appreciate that. And we are going to continue this vein of healing, helping, and hope. I like those 3 H's.
Me too.
All right. Stay tuned.